This is a conspiracy. That's what this is.
Just begging to course its way through your veins.
Let's just for a moment speculate, shall we?
You're into comic books, aren't you?
I'm a nerd.
But you do like comic books.
Comic books aren't just for sad nerds anymore.
Objection, calls for speculation, move to strike.
This is a bad idea. This is a bad idea.
You think we need one more? You think we need one more? All right, we'll get one more.
Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Spec Tales, a comic book podcast. I am your host, Jake. He's your other host, Jesus. Jesus, how's it going?
It's going great, man. Happy to be back on.
Yeah, for the 5th episode. Wow, I'm actually kind of surprised. It's been over a month since we started this. Can you believe that?
I honestly cannot. I feel like that saying "time flies when you're having fun" really is great. Is a great example of what we're doing right now.
I definitely am having fun, but it also feels like time flies when you're stressed. No, it's just every week I'm like, oh man, we got to do another one, and I get so nervous to start each one of these. But thank you all, everybody, for listening. If you are first joining us for the first time, this is a comic book podcast where we like to focus on stories about comic books. Every comic book has a story, and so does every collector, is what we like to say. And so we tell grail tales or tales about chasing a certain comic book. We also enjoy talking about speculation, comic book speculation, which books are going to pop off and when. And so we'll talk about different characters and things like that we're eyeing ourselves. Today, we're going to talk about a trade. I made a trade this last week, and partially spurred by our last episode. Some of what we talked about kind of got me in the mood to go see if I could figure out how to get a book. And lo and behold, I managed to do it within a week. So
I think that's a little thing that goes unnoticed, that you got this. I mean, whenever you tell a story, you got it within a week. So that's kind of crazy.
It is a little crazy. I don't know how I did it, to be honest. But we'll get to that, and we'll talk a little bit about some books that we recently purchased and some speculation stuff that we are looking at either purchasing in the near future or just things that we are seeing in the market that we are keeping our eye on. Anyway, so let's jump right into what we purchased recently. I like starting off with that, kind of gets us into the conversation. Now, Jesus, I'm going to let you go first.
So it wouldn't be another Spec Tales episode without one of us or both of us talking about our favorite spec of the day, of the week, of the month, however you want to call it. Another Hercules spec, Journey into Mystery Annual number 1. I'm trying to catch up to the guy who has 3 on the other side. I
forgot that I had 3.
So I have 1, and it's from one of the same sellers that you bought it from. It's just a slightly, I guess, less condition, lower condition, just depending on how the grader feels that day. But then I also wanted to spec how I normally spec on this book, which is trying to find, again, my background is in real estate. So when you buy a house, you want to buy the cheapest house on the block. So I wanted to buy the cheapest book to get into this spec, and I found a really good candidate for cleaning up and pressing and taking off some tape and maybe potentially conserving it. And initially it was $75. I didn't buy it at that. I thought that was overpriced for the book. So I waited till they relisted it. They relisted it once at $50 and then once at $40. And I ended up buying it this week for $52.
Wow.
So I'm not really, $52 I think is a pretty good entry point for that book. As we've talked about in the past, it's hard to get that book in a high grade because it's a square bound book. It's a Silver Age book. It's white, and people just didn't care about it, man. I mean, I don't think anybody was caring about the first appearance. It's not only the first appearance of Hercules, it's also the first appearance of Zeus. So it's technically not a spec book. It's a warm blanket book. So I'm just happy to have the second one. It's already been shipped. I have the tracking on it. So nice. As soon as it gets in, I'll see what kind of surgery it's going to need to look better. I've also put some feelers out for some affordable conservation specialists that will help me with this book, because I don't know why, man. I want to get a conserved label. I don't want to get a restored label. I want to see what the conservation's all about. I feel like to an extent, a lot of comic book collectors are conservatists or something, whatever that word is, where we try to conserve the books for the long term to continue the hobby. So
yeah, to collect it long term. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's interesting. I mean, it's definitely an interesting prospect to see how that works. Okay, so let's go into what I purchased recently, and you're gonna laugh. I swear it's not an annual number one, but it does pertain to Hercules.
Oh.
Okay, so I talked to Jesus a little bit about this before. Sometimes I feel like comic books tend to present themselves to you in an unexpected way. So you're not expecting to find it, you are not even looking for it, and yet the book pops up and you're like, I gotta buy it. So a book presented itself to me late last week. I believe it was Friday, and it was Journey into Mystery 124. My presser actually was at his LCS, and he is a listener of the podcast. And so he understands, he knows that I've been really specking on Hercules. And he sent me multiple photos and he said, hey, do you want any of these? And it was multiple photos of Journey into Mystery 124. This is the second appearance of Hercules, first appearance of Queen Ula, U-L-A.
Mm-hmm.
This book has much more. Journey into Mystery Annual number 1 has a really short Hercules versus Thor fight. Mm-hmm. And Zeus breaks it up at the end. It's a short story. This one is a full issue dedicated to Hercules and Thor and their fight, or a fight. But in this particular case, it's not an annual, but this second appearance is actually really affordable right now. A lot of people, when the speculation started hitting hard with regards to Hercules, Journey into Mystery Annual number 1, of course, went off. And 126 is that epic Thor versus Hercules cover where they're kind of entangled on the front cover. Mm-hmm. So that cover is already extremely expensive and hard to get. But 124 has a really iconic Jack Kirby cover as well. And it's the second Hercules, so it's still a key, and it's got the first Queen Ula. So I think that this is a great book to have. It's undervalued in a lot of ways, in my opinion. And if you're specking on Hercules already, you might as well go in. So my presser, who I affectionately call Taco, he texts me and he sends me multiple photos, and his LCS has the same book in multiple grades. They have a 7.0, they have a 6.5, they have a 6.0, and they have I think they had a lower grade, like a 3.0 or something like that. And I don't remember what all the prices were on each individual one, but he's looking at them and he's telling me this 6.5 doesn't look like a 6.5. It looks a lot lower. It's got a lot of nicks, and he sends me photos, and I'm like, yeah, that's a beat up book a little bit. It looks pretty beat up. And he says, well, look at the 7.0. The 7.0 looks really clean. And then he says, I know this guy. I know who the LCS owner is. I can see if I can work him down, get a better deal here. And I said, well, if you can get that book down like $20, $30, then it'll be right in a really sweet spot price point. I think that'd be a great thing to do, great thing to try. The thing I mean, I certainly had, this book has been on my radar, but I wasn't looking to buy it. Yeah, I wasn't actively trying to buy it, but it was a really clean copy. He sent me a bunch of pictures, and the thing is this is the person who's going to press and clean this book for me anyway. And he's telling me, he's looking at all of them. He's like, that 7.0 is a deal. Anyway, so that was a book that I just recently purchased.
But real quick, man, that cover is dope, man. I really like that cover. He's just walking in the background. He looks like a giant. You have Thor fighting underneath him. It says Enter Hercules on it, and then it has, the cool little splashing that they put on there, the glory and the grandeur with an exclamation point on it.
It's
so
it's a great Jack Kirby cover.
Yeah, it's really cool, man.
Yeah, so I'm excited to have that. The interesting thing is, since I'm gonna have Taco press it and clean it anyway, I'm not gonna see it until it comes back from CGC at this point.
Well, honestly, that also saves you shipping, right?
Yeah,
So-
well, exactly. He's gonna get it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that I will be submitting that book along with our other Hercules books that we're going to be sending down to Taco anyway. Moving on, let's talk trade. So I pulled off a trade this week that I am still kind of in shock from. 1 week ago, we sat down with Ryan from Automatic Comics and we talked about a specific book that I really, if you would have told me a week ago when we recorded that 1 week later I was going to own one of these books, I would have told you to get the hell out the door. That I didn't believe me. Because this was a book that I honestly, the conversation we had with Ryan is what sparked in my head, like, you know what, I actually could own one of these, because I keep thinking, I don't have the cash to put down for a Hulk 181, but I do have the capital in comic books.
You have the assets.
Exactly. I had the assets to trade. And it was more of an experiment. As soon as I decided, you know what, let's see if I can actually get this done. Instantly, from the point of us talking about it, I started doing research into, okay, how much are my books worth versus how much will that get me in grade as far as from a 181. So that's where I started. And then I started looking on eBay, started looking on Instagram, and attempting to find suitors. And that's I guess it's not as slow. I would say it's a slow process, but to be honest, I got this whole thing done in a week, so I guess it wasn't that slow.
Well, I mean, in fairness, when you reveal the books that you put up, it's not slow for you, but technically it's usually slow because some people have a smaller asset base, or their partner that they're willing to trade with wants a certain book or certain books, and you might not have those books. So I just think it was like a perfect storm for you, man.
Yeah, it definitely seemed to be. And in this particular case, I was specifically trying to find a trade partner who is not a collector. So I was trying to give them books that they could flip quickly. I have some assets, things that I wasn't exactly like rushing to get rid of, but they were books that were on my holding with intent to sell area of my collection. Like, I don't mind having them, but if I can, sell them to get this, it became a good opportunity. So I was reaching out directly to multiple sellers on eBay. I had some people come back and say, no, thank you, I don't do trades. I had somebody come back and say, I'll do, I'm open to trades, but what do you have? And I listed the books that I had, and they said, no, not interested in those books. And then I had another another group that I refer to them as the car dealership of comic book sales. It was talking to this, it was a company, and they were very, very businesslike. When I reached out to them, first I found the book, and the book was listed on the book was listed on eBay, but then I also found that they had a Instagram account. So I reached out via Instagram, and the message I got back right away was, hey, I don't have an answer directly for you, but I can put you in contact with the person at our company who can give you an answer on that. And they gave me additional contact information. I said, oh, that's interesting. They have somebody just working their Instagram. Most people who sell comic books, they'll have a big company name, but it's just one guy usually. This person actually had, or this company actually had somebody running their social. I also found out that they had a receptionist, somebody answering phone calls at this company. And I was like, man, this, the way they answer and the way they talk to you, it felt like a car dealership. And they were like, oh, the way we do trade-ins is we'll give you this amount, this percentage of what your trade-ins are worth. And then this is, how much we value this book at. And I was like, this sounds exactly like when you're trading in a car to get a new car.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I was really trying hard to make that one work because that book was a 6.0 white page copy. And if I'm going to trade a lot of my assets, I'm going to make sure I get a book that I really wanted. Now, my Giant Size X-Men 1 is a 6.0 white page copy. So I had decided I definitely want to get at least a 6.0 white page copy Hulk 181. I think they'd look nice next to each other, so on and so forth. It's an OCD thing. I wanted the two numbers to line up. After reaching out, they gave me their numbers and I tried to negotiate because they wanted more, considerably more than what that book was worth. Not just what the book was worth on the open market, but what that book, they wanted.
What percentage would you put it?
Well, I know that they were already 30% above GPA.
That's what they were asking for in cash.
That's what they were asking for if you were just to go to eBay and buy it.
30% above GPA.
30% above GPA is where they were at.
Wow.
And then they wanted an additional $2,000 on top of that.
So trade value.
For trade. Yes.
Wow.
For the trade value. They wanted, so the book was already listed on, like I said, on eBay for 30% above GPA value. And then they wanted $2,000 on top of that. Now, I came into the situation thinking that this was just a starting point for negotiations. And there was no negotiating whatsoever on this side. Not only, so they took an initial offer from me, and then they came back and they didn't budge on their offer. And they essentially just said, sorry, this isn't going to work out. Good luck finding your book. We hope to do business with you again in the future. They completely cut ties altogether. And I responded back via email and I was just like, hold on, wait a minute. I'm trying to work something out with you. Can we work with where you have yours evaluated? And they were just absolutely not. They didn't even respond to that last email. And I was
unprofessional.
It was essentially just they cut ties completely.
There's that saying that was, I think it was P.T. Barnum that said it, where he's like, there's a sucker born every minute.
Yeah.
Right? I think they're looking for suckers, man. And as soon as they realized that you weren't a sucker and you came with the GPA info and kind of saying, hey, man, like, let's work something out. And they're like, no, this is not the guy for us that we're going to be able to fleece. Honestly, man, if you're already 30% above GPA and you tack on another $2,000 in trade value, that's called the come up, man. They're trying to have a come up on one book. They're basically valuing it at that point. If I remember the numbers correctly that you told me, they're like at the very least doubling the price of GPA on that book in trade value. And that just
essentially,
and that's just ridiculous to me, man. Why is any book, even an Amazing Fantasy 15 is not worth double in trade value? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. And my argument here is not that I did not expect them to sell a 181 or to trade a 181 for GPA, right? I think that that's unreasonable. I very rarely would imagine if you can even buy it for GPA value, I think you'd be pretty darn lucky. But ultimately, it is a book that is going to sell fast, always, relatively fast. And so I wasn't going into this conversation thinking I was doing them a favor by trying to trade them for it. However, with the books that I was offering to trade, I didn't think that it was a bad deal by any means. Now, I was talking to you throughout this trade process, and you were immediately like, you got to cut ties. Don't talk to them anymore. These guys are trying to fleece you. And the thing is I was just so focused on, I can get this book. And you were like, just sell all the books you have and to do it. I'm like, yeah. And then I don't get Hulk 181 for another 2 months because that's how long it's going to take, or it's going to take at least a month and a half to sell all these books, take all that cash and buy a Hulk 181. By that point, they will have announced who's playing Wolverine in the MCU. The book will triple in value and then I won't get it. And then I will have sold all my books so that I can't even buy the Hulk 181 like I want. So I decided I was going to prove you wrong and I was going to get the book anyway. So
All right. Hold on. Before you move on, mark this down. We're let me see. October 15th. If there's no announcement by October 15th, I was right.
Okay. Well, let's see if one of us remembers that. I'm sure whoever's right will remember. So I proceed to try to find other suitors. And I go back to eBay. And while I was very, very specifically looking for a 6.0 white page Hulk 181, I decided to expand my selection for books. Lo and behold, I did have somebody who had a 6.5 white page copy respond back, and they said, hey, I do trades. This is how I do it. I give you X percentage of what your books are worth, GPA, and this is the value of my book. The thing is they were not 30% above GPA for their price. So they already had a good price on their book to start with. And then they evaluated my books, and they evaluated my books in what I thought was high. I thought that they gave me a lot of value for my books. We initially at one point we were talking about including Avengers number 8, the first issue of Kang, or the first appearance of Kang. Ultimately, the GPA has not caught up to how popular that book is. So it's actually got a very low GPA compared to what it's going for on the market. And so that Avengers 8 book came off of the trade, off the trade table. And I don't know if they were against it, upset with that or anything like that. I think they wanted the Kang book, but there was no arguing with where the GPA values were. So here are the books. Go ahead.
And I really respect that of them.
I will say this individual that I traded with, I would do business with again anytime. And I would be very happy to purchase from this person with cash. I think that they're an honest seller. The book it was by far the best packaging I've ever seen. It was a box within a box covered in bubble wrap and then triple wrapped with like bubble envelope. Like this thing,
bulletproof.
Basically, it was something to aspire to in terms of packaging. So I traded my 5 books. A 9.0 Avengers 48. This is a book that I got for literally less than $150 for my LCS this year. I got it so cheap. But the thing was, you could have looked at the market at the end of January. Nobody was buying this book. It was not that high valued. And I got it. It was a raw book. I submitted it. It came back a 9.0. I was a little shocked. I didn't think it was that high, but who's going to argue with CGC when they give you a higher grade than you were expecting?
Nobody.
I traded a 7.0 Silver Surfer 3. If you're on Instagram, go look at Mixed Bag Comics. Mixed Bag does a lot of great raffles. And he's a really nice guy. He's a really funny guy. So if you're chatting with him, he's good to talk to as well. I traded my 8.5 Iron Man 55. This was a book that I was actually committing to the personal collection. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think I was going to get rid of it. But when the Kang book was no longer valued high enough, I ended up needing to fill that gap with something. And so I filled it with Iron Man 50, my 8.5 Iron Man 55. I think the value of that book is going to continue to come down a little bit as everybody focuses on Kang.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
So it's completely possible that I'll be able to find the same book, for a good price. I traded a 6.0 white page X-Men 14. And then finally, a 9.2 white page copy of Amazing Spider-Man 124. This is the first appearance of Man-Wolf. So I got this trade put together, completed. I mailed him my books. He took a look at them, made sure that they all checked out. And then he sent me the 181, and it all happened in less than a week's time. By yesterday, Saturday, so one week to the day after we talked about the idea of trading, I was able to complete the trade. I wasn't attempting to do it within a week of it. It just happened that way. And it's kind of one of those things. I just set my mind to try to get the 181, and I did it. I am thrilled with the copy that I got. It is a gorgeous copy. I think that, the defects on it is there must have been some tape. Somebody, had put tape on this book at some point and then pulled it off. So there are these little just areas along the spine where it looks like some tape had kind of been ripped off a little bit. It's hard to tell otherwise. And the corners, everything's perfect. The red is really nice and red. It's a great copy. So very happy to have it, not going anywhere anytime soon.
There are a lot of Hulk 181s out there, but that one is yours.
Exactly right. So that is the trade tale. I think that that's something that people, I don't know if it's overlooked or I don't know if it's just that difficult to find a good trade partner. I want to say I think that I got lucky. I found a very good trade partner, somebody who was willing to give me good value for books that are easy. I think those are going to be books that are easy to sell, though.
I think it was, in my opinion, I think it was a great trade. The type of book you got is always going to be in vogue, if you will. Everyone's always going to want Wolverine. You got a high. I consider it a high grade copy, 6.5. It's mid grade, but it's still high on the higher end. The red does pop. I know people can't see it. We'll probably post it so you guys can see it. But the red does pop on that book a lot. And it's a newer case. It's just a gorgeous book, man. So I think you did well on the trade.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. Okay, so just to keep in time, let's do something real quick that I think is going to be fun. We're going to start adding a new. When it's just Jesus and I think we're going to add this new segment to the podcast, and that's Tales from the Internet. Mm-hmm. Jesus, you were on Reddit and you found a Grail tale. Somebody was telling the story of how they got a book or something along those lines. So I'll let you take it from here, but tell me what you got.
Yeah, so I was on Reddit, man. We're probably going to be expanding our empire into the Reddit verse, kind of like a multiverse for Spec Tales. And while I was on there, I saw something posted and I was like, oh man, this is pretty cool. Let me check it out. It was posted about 4 days ago from the time of the recording. So by the time it comes out, it's probably a week ago. But the main thing on the post was a picture, and it was Fantastic Four #1, which I don't know at this point. I feel like we have to buy one for the Spec Tales podcast collection just because it's the second time it comes up. But it's just an iconic book. Is what started it all. Everyone's talked about that. So Fantastic Four #1. And when you look at this picture, the book is in pretty good condition. And there's like 3 things that pop out to you once you're like really looking at it. One, you have 2 signatures on there. And then you have this stamp on there, top right corner in red. Overall, it's pretty good condition. And it says the story on this dual sign Fantastic Four is in the comments. So you go into the comments and then you read it, and the gentleman writes that, and I'm kind of going to read it verbatim for the most part, but this guy says, I was able to afford this Fantastic Four #1 several years ago because the seller had it severely marked down because some kid wrote on the cover. Some kid, I don't know, like it reminded me of the Sandlot, Baby Ruth, or some lady named Baby Ruth or something wrote on the ball. But some kid wrote on the cover, and the guy goes, as soon as I saw that some kid was Jack Kirby, it was a real life shut up and take my money moment for him. So he bought it immediately. It was slabbed as a 7.0 blue label. And he agrees with the 7.0, but he does think that the cover was trimmed, but who cares because it had a Jack Kirby signature on it, right? So his son and him cracked it out of the slab for two reasons. First, they read every book that they get because it's important to them to read the book that is something awesome for them. And yes, they do take the precautions. And second, we knew Stan Lee was going to be doing his last New York Comic Con signing in a few months, and we wanted to get him to sign it. His son was 9. My son was 9 years old when he handed it to Stan, and Stan actually took a moment to talk to him about it. And he said, in quotations, "This is where it all started, and this book saved us," or among the things that he can remember that Stan Lee said. He called his son Cap because his son was carrying a Captain America shield. And then Stan handed the book back to them and said, "Now go get the bad guys." So he's saying that this book is in the collection. He'll never sell it, no matter what. And to them, it's more than just a Grail book. It's a host of great memories. And, I don't know, man. When I read this, I was like, man, this is our podcast. This is Spec Tales podcast here, man. This is why we do it. So it's just a really cool story, man. It has a lot of history there. They actually got a dual sign, one by Jack Kirby, one by Stan Lee. The son was 9 years old when this happened. They cracked the slab, which is scary for anybody. It's still in its raw condition. In the comments, people are asking him, why doesn't he get a slab at CBCS so they can authenticate? He says he's already had both signatures authenticated. Stan Lee's was authenticated when he was there signing it, and Jack Kirby's was authenticated through PSA. And I mean, if anybody knows Jack Kirby's signature, it's pretty, I don't know, iconic. You can kind of tell who it is. It's kind of, I don't know if it's hard to fake, but when I saw it, I was like, oh man, that's Jack Kirby. So I don't know, man. It's just a really cool story on how he got it, how he was able to afford it. Somebody wrote on it, some kid wrote on it, and I just thought it was really cool, man. And I'm sure there's tons of stories like this out there.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, and absolutely the type of stuff that we love talking about. To me, it's when you see how Stan Lee reacted just to the kid bringing that book up to sign it, and at that point in his career, how many signings do you think Stan Lee had done? Right, like he had probably signed over 1 million books, and for him to still sit there, see the book come across, and still get excited to say, this is the one that started it all. That Fantastic Four #1. That's why that book is always going to be coveted. It is always going to be a blue chip key. It's one of those things that it is an absolute grail.
Yeah, man. I thought it was really cool. But I will say that now Fantastic Four #1 is up there with that Amazing Fantasy 15 for me. I have to get these books somehow, and I will lie, cheat, steal, kill. No, I'm just joking. No, but I definitely have it now on my radar. Like, I mean, it's on everybody's radar. It's a grail, it's a grail for anybody, but it wasn't as coveted for me. Like, again, if you go back to our last episode, I talked about a gentleman that would trade me Amazing Fantasy 15 for a Fantastic Four #1 and a Hulk #1. And I was getting it probably to do that. But now I probably would keep it, because I think now it's a part of my collecting history somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that kind of concludes as far as the tales from the internet. But something that we're going to do, and as Azu said, we're going to start looking for these tales out there. And it is something that we are wanting people to send us as well. We've given our email out a few times. Haven't had anybody take us up on it. But please, if you can find, if you want to have us read your story or something like that. We just want to know your, a Grail tale. You don't necessarily have to be the most eloquent writer. Just tell us what happened. Tell us how you got the book and tell us why it's important to you. You can send those to spectalespodcast@gmail.com. Or you can find us and reach out to us on Instagram at spec_tales_podcast.
Man, and don't be shy, man. We want to hear these stories. I'm sure there's some crazy stories out there. I know for some that I've been a party to somehow, some way, as far as like they didn't even know they were saying a Grail tale that I would like to see told here on the podcast or in some form or fashion. Like I guess what I'm saying is we want to preserve them. I don't want them lost to the annals of history when they're so cool, and they just kind of like highlight why we do what we do in this hobby. So definitely reach out. We don't bite. And we'd love to hear your stories.
Absolutely. So let's close this episode out with one spec. I'll let you go first.
Yes. So there was a recent Marvel casting that was announced about 4 days ago. I think it went under the radar. I forgot the gentleman's name, but he is of South Korean descent. So the spec is that this gentleman is going to play Amadeus Cho, who is the totally awesome Hulk. Then he gets renamed to the Hulk, and then he gets renamed to Brawn. And that would make sense for a lot of reasons. One, they already have America Chavez cast. They have Kamala Khan cast. Miles Morales is cast. And this Hulk is a totally new Hulk. Is a totally awesome Hulk, I think is his code name. And he's also part of a few new teams. He's not in the Young Avengers. He's in the Champions, the new Champions from 2016 with Miles Morales, Silk, Nova, Kamala Khan. And he's also with the Protectors, which is, who is it? I forgot who it is, but he's with them. And then he's also on the Ultimates. So I think he's going to play that character. He's going to come out in the Miss Marvel TV series. That's what he was cast for. Mm-hmm. So I'm specking on him being Amadeus Cho. That book is still somewhat affordable. I think it's going for around $245, $240 raw for a good copy. I also really like the cover. It's an Amazing Fantasy 15 cover. And it's an homage cover to the original Amazing Fantasy 15. And it just has a lot of characters on it. It's a 50-page book. So it's a pretty cool story. There's also some other keys for him, like Incredible Hercules, number 133, which is the origin of Amadeus Cho. It has a small print run of 27,000. And then you have Totally Awesome Hulk number 1, which is his first appearance as the Hulk. So bunch of keys on there, and that's what I'm gonna be specking on. That's what I'm gonna be trying to pick up here in the next week or so.
Nice. Okay, I've got a couple. I guess I'll talk about one. I'll say neither of them are true spec, but I do want to bring up Shang-Chi. So the first appearance of Shang-Chi, the Special Marvel Edition 15. This is not exactly a speculation book anymore. However, I will say there's been a lot of negativity surrounding the movie recently. A lot of people are saying, I mean, its projections for the box office for the movie's release is way down. People are saying that it's going to be a bomb already, whether that be because people aren't going to the box office or whether that is simply, I don't know whether they don't think the character is going to be, embraced by the Marvel fan base, or if it's just because it's not releasing on Disney Plus either. Disney is, is it 45 days? They're going to do 45 days for theaters only, and then it will release on Disney Plus. And I think some people are upset about that. And I don't completely understand where all the negativity is coming from, but I've also noticed that the book is not selling anywhere near the numbers that it hit when the trailer came out. The trailer came out. I don't know anybody who disliked the trailer. Seemed like everybody thought it was amazing. And then the numbers of the book went way up, and it's kind of come back down. And now that we're getting closer and closer to the movie, the sales are dropping a little bit. The numbers aren't great. And then now there's all this talk about the movie not performing as well as they would like it to at the box office. And I'm just going to come out and say it. The movie is going to be a success. I think the character is going to be a huge success within the MCU. And I think that this is a really, really good time to still get in on Special Marvel Edition 15. I'm a big buyer on this book. I always have been. But I don't think, whether it is a box office flop or not, I don't believe that this is going to impact how Disney and Marvel move forward with the character. I believe that they're going to, whatever plans they have for Shang-Chi, I think that they are going to move forward with them regardless of how the box office works during a time of COVID. I don't think it's reasonable to expect Infinity War numbers, right? It's not Endgame type numbers for an origin story movie.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head right there, that it needs to be compared to other origin story movies like Captain Marvel, like the first Avenger, which is Captain America, like the first Thor. But I'm still a buyer on the book. I have 2 copies myself. They're in grading. I hope to get them back sometime soon. But if I see it going down more, I'm probably going to make another move on it, because I definitely believe it's undervalued compared to its sister book, Tomb of Dracula 10. So,
yep. And the second thing that I'm just going to note is, you may notice that in my trade, a majority of the books revolved around villains. And this is something that I would just, if possible, recommend to people. So I traded multiple books that were villain-related books. Thanos, Sentinels, Mephisto, those 3, depending on how you look at Manwolf. I know he's not necessarily a villain, but he is a darker character. And I would say, so looking at these characters, villains, they'll peak in the MCU because of the MCU. These comic books will potentially peak, and they may last. They may continue to sustain a certain amount of value. However, I do think that they have a ceiling. I think villains are books that you flip. Now, if you get attached to a villain, or there's a book that you really like, of course, go grab the book, keep it, put it in the personal collection, never get rid of it. However, I think that these books, I was able to sell high, so to speak, on a lot of it. Now, a very large majority of the value that was in the trade came from the 9.0 Avengers 48, which is, of course, the first Black Knight, not a villain in any way. So I did have to trade a hero as well. But I do think that trading villains seemed to me like a good way to obtain a major hero book. Okay, so let's go ahead and wrap this thing up. Something that I do want to take a moment to actually do. I don't know if you noticed, did you see we actually have a written review on Apple Podcasts?
Oh no, I hadn't checked that out yet.
I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to read it. I want to do a special thanks to Joey Does Comics. I don't know if you know Joey. I've never met him, of course, but I know him from Instagram at Joey Does Comics. He has a fantastic feed. He's great to follow along. So I do recommend everybody go out. Joey went ahead and gave us a 5-star review, and then he wrote the following. Absolutely love this podcast. Everything about it. Not a big podcast guy, and I actually never listened to a podcast all the way through until you guys. Love the Grail Tales, and of course, the general comic talk is very intriguing. Keep up the great work, guys. I gotta say, I was not only pleased to see the review, but just ultimately kind of, I don't know, overwhelmed might be a strong word, but I was definitely a little, taken back. Like, people are actually listening, so that's amazing.
Man, it's so funny. This is so crazy, man, how this world works. I hadn't seen it, I swear, on whatever. I had never seen this review, but I was looking at his YouTube channel, and I think he just went to like Orlando Con or something. I think he actually did a trade, and I think he traded for a Fantastic Four 48. I think he did as well. Yeah. So yeah, man. So thank you, man. Shout out to Joey Does Comics, man. I'm watching your YouTube videos, man. Keep doing what you're doing as well. I like them a lot, and I'm kind of catching up on some of them. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And if you guys can go out there and give us some reviews, we'd appreciate it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, whatever star rating you want, as long as it's above 3. All right. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you all next week, where we will have another special guest and another Grail Tale.